Hello there guys, Billybae10K here, bringing you a follow-up video to my Monster Hunter Rise demo First Impressions video, which I posted 2 months ago. If you haven't watched that video yet, I would highly recommend it, as I will be referencing my experiences documented in that video throughout this one, link in the top right corner. I go over all the weapons and monsters in that initial version 1 from the perspective of someone who has never played a Monster Hunter game before, and that's the same perspective I'll be taking with this new mission, the battle against the Magnamalo, Rise's flagship monster. Going into this, I don't actually expect to succeed in my mission. I'm taking on an advanced enemy that is designed to be difficult, that is designed to challenge players who are used to the Monster Hunter formula, and on single player this monster is no doubt the toughest challenge yet. But with Rise releasing on the 26th, now is the best time to jump in and try out the hunt against this titan of a wyvern. So, can I beat the Magnamalo with no prior experience with the franchise, a basic understanding of battle mechanics, and no online multiplayer to help ease me in? Without further ado, let us begin. From the moment I booted up the demo once again, I had a game plan. Take the weapons I had the most success with in my first video and focus on using those to my advantage, the hunting horn and the switch axe. But things didn't pan out quite as well as I'd hoped. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I certainly wasn't ready to be one-shotted by basic attacks, taken out without even getting a hit in with my chosen weapons, etc, etc. I realized instantly that I was completely and utterly outmatched. And I knew I had one hell of a climb ahead of me if I wanted to solo the Magnamalo. I simply could not beat this monster with the base knowledge of my weapons. The first order of business was determining which of the two weapons I actually wanted to put my time into. With the difficulty as high as it was, I couldn't mix and match between the switch axe and the hunting horn. So after some attempts with both weapons, I ultimately decided to put my focus on the hunting horn. The idea of being able to buff yourself in battle with your notes while having two very powerful silkbind moves, one of which having super armor that allows you to perform the attack without the animation being cancelled, was the tipping point. So with my decision made, my journey truly began. Initially, my goal was just to charge the Magnamalo without much care for setup. I didn't know this guy's moves or mechanics, and I hadn't looked up a guide at this point, so for all I knew, I could theoretically play a perfect match and take this guy down in the 15-minute time limit. Oh, how naive I was. As everyone can probably predict, that was an awful approach. Death after death, feint after feint. Mission failed, mission failed, mission failed. It was demoralizing, and a part of me wanted to stop early on and just say, you know what, this is too hard for a beginner, that's the point, you'll have chances to win in the main game. But that was too easy, that was the lazy option, and I wasn't willing to take the easy way out. If I truly believe there's a chance I could improve, well, a trial by Hellblight, if you will. Sticking with it, I began to understand certain patterns to the Magnamalo's attacks. Now, understanding and dodging are two very different concepts that, for a while, remained mutually exclusive. Just because I understood his attacks and his tells, that didn't mean I was experienced enough to know all the right dodges. The attack where he grinds his claws in front of him and swipes them in an arc was an attack I just never understood the timing for at first, while the various tail stabs never got easier to dodge. Sometimes I'd have hunts where I avoid them perfectly, other times I'd get absolutely hammered. Combine that with the Hellblight that buffs certain portions of the Magnamalo's body, and you can see the one-shot kills piling up. I found it very hard to actually hit the monster, as I would often be struggling with the camera to orient myself correctly. I was ready to call it quits after maybe the 20th death? And then I discovered focus mode. Nobody told me that the Monster Hunter games had toggleable lock-on features. For experienced players, of course the lock-on isn't something they actively use because they're skilled enough to cope without it, but for someone like me who's never played these games, an inexperienced player, the lock-on system gave me a chance to learn. You can target various body parts including the torso, the head, and the tail, and with how fast the Magnamalo is, being able to keep it constantly in the camera's sights was a game-changing revelation. Suddenly, I was able to survive for longer in battles and keep up with the Magnamalo, even applying pressure because I could always see what it was doing. But it still wasn't enough. It was progress, but I needed to do more research. I looked up a hunting horn guide for the demo, just so I knew exactly what my weapon can do, what the different buffs were for, what my options were, and that was when I really clicked with the hunting horn. Understanding the mechanics meant I was able to experiment more, I made riskier plays, I used all 3 of my notes to ensure I could use the magnificent trio attack, and I learned to use the secret hunting horn song to buff my attacks for a short period of time. I really thought I was ready. I wasn't. Little did I know I would take over 150 attempts at the Magnamalo, changing up strategies and learning more and more about Rise's game mechanics that I simply didn't look at initially. For example, I figured out how to use the shock and pitfall traps effectively to get some quick damage on the Magnamalo. I learned that if you use the Fellvine command, selectable via the D-pad, you will, for whatever reason, get to use the last item you used again, even if you've ran out. So I could make a second shock trap, for example. I learned about the qualities of different endemic life, such as the elemental beetles like Thunder Beetle and Snow Beetle, which inflict their elemental blights. The Snow Beetle would slow down the Magnamalo, while the Thunder Beetle allowed me to more easily stun the creature, allowing for massive damage. The Blast Toad was also incredibly useful, acting as a quick landmine that would always down the Magnamalo if caught in the blast, and combining all of this with the Spiri Birds that buff your stats for the mission when you pass them, the endemic life really became key to my hunts. On top of that, you had 2 other monsters around the arena, the Rathian and the Mizutsune, which you could use Silkbind moves to inflict a dazed state, allowing you to Wyvern ride them around the battlefield. Sometimes I'd seek them out, other times they'd come to the Magnamalo and sometimes I would even ride the Magnamalo into them just to get them into that state. But anytime I had a chance to ride one, I would. The Rathian's tail swipes, while slow, were effective damage dealers, dealing around 150 damage per hit, while the Mizutsune was fast and agile, able to stun and slam the Magnamalo with various bubbles without issue. Without them, I don't think I would even stand a chance against this creature, as they helped me get crucial damage on the target, and I was almost always guaranteed to get time to wail on the Magnamalo once I'd hopped off my mount. And yet, with all of this, I was still struggling. And then, I don't know when it happened, but I realized I stopped using the lock-on feature. Around attempt 100 or so, I just realized I wasn't using it anymore. My time with the lock-on allowed me to observe the Magnamalo's moves, and they trained me in a way that I was able to now dodge his attacks without needing to use the lock-on mechanic. Suddenly, I was ducking, diving, dodging, and damaging like a professional. I learned that if you wanted to really hurt the Magnamalo, aiming for the fiery limbs or its head was the way to go, and my goal became less about doing overall damage and more about stunning and aiming for specific body parts for higher damage. It got to a point where I could, a good 60% of the time, get the Magnamalo down to its last third of health. In some cases, even seeing the fabled blue skull icon that denoted it was close to death. But cornered creatures can often be the most dangerous, and the Magnamalo got very aggressive in these instances. Most often, I'd find myself caught off guard and hit by its tail energy blast. But more than that, I failed to account for one crucial aspect of the hunt's endgame: myself. Whenever the blue skull icon appeared, the adrenaline would start pumping, my hands would start shaking, I would start getting sloppy through no fault of my own aside from my nerve. I would get antsy for the final blow, knowing time was probably almost up, and that would lead to my demise. And this was something I couldn't simply overcome. It was the final hurdle. I had to beat myself. Countless evenings were spent on this demo from the 17th to the 22nd of March 2021, and throughout it all, I really felt like giving up multiple times. I felt like ending this charade, thinking maybe I just can't do it, despite the progress I made, despite the fact that if I just played perfectly, I could win. I could prove that you can be an inexperienced player and still have the skills to take down the Magnamalo. It was a bragging right I really wanted to achieve, a solo juiced up Magnamalo kill by a new player. I learned my routes depending on its spawn. I quit out of attempts early when I knew I didn't have the time to win. I grinded and grinded this mission to the very depths. And then, on my 153rd attempt, I gave it one last shot. I sped up to the Rathian and Wyvern rode it into the Magnamalo at the start of the match, doing enough damage to make him flee to Area 12. I followed up the cliff, collected the Blast Toad, and from there engaged in one of the toughest battles of my life. If I fainted, the run would be dead. My only option was to do enough damage to keep me going, because the Magnamalo was so far from spawn that I'd waste too much time. After a well-placed pitfall trap, I got my opening. A Wyvern ride prompt. With this, I could move the Magnamalo down to Area 6, where the Mizutsune was waiting. By launching the Magnamalo into the Mizutsune, I stunned them both, gave myself time to whetstone my hunting horn, and then I hopped on the Bubble Dragon's back. After another quick battle, I had my first feint. But with the target closer to the respawn camp, I was able to get back quickly and continue the fight. Without any extra combat items aside from my healing though, I was at the mercy of my ability to dodge this creature. I had to take my time to ensure I wouldn't faint again. Avoiding the rampage as much as possible, I beat the Magnamalo down, and then, like many times before, the blue skull appeared. In that same moment, the target fled to Area 4, attempting to escape my efforts to slay it, and with that, I knew the final battle was approaching. I simply had to do enough damage to finish Magnamalo off, but I'd been in this situation before, and I'd lost before due to my negligence. I tried to fight the onslaught of its attacks that this feral beast was firing, but it was so aggressive, I was pinned and overwhelmed trying to heal, only to get caught by its claws. With just over a minute left and no more respawns, I knew I had to get back there. I knew my chance for victory was closing, and I wasn't sure if I could pull it off. I probably needed a good 700 to 1000 more damage to take home the win, and in less than a minute, I wasn't sure if I could handle it. I wasn't expecting to return to see the Rathian, of all things, had reappeared. In past runs, whenever a wyvern I had recently ridden approached us after that event, it would often flee or fly away, but this time, it fought the Magnamalo, and my target struck it down. And then there was a glimmer of hope. Attack and ride wyvern. I didn't know you could ride the same monster twice. It had never happened before. In my genuine surprise, I leapt onto the Rathian, praying there was still time. On my recording software, there's a red record icon that covers the top left of the screen, conveniently where the hunting clock was, so I genuinely had no idea how much time I had left. The moment I had enough damage racked up to do a mounted punisher, I took it. I wanted to get back down there off the Rathian as quickly as possible, my attacks were faster, and then I used my thrusting Silkbind attack. The final blow. I did it. He's dead. I actually succeeded. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I actually could do it. Someone with no experience taking on and finally defeating a beast that experienced players were struggling with. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I stood there, tears shed, joys abound. This was truly a momentous occasion. And funnily enough, this trial by Hellblight trained me in a way that no tutorials or in-game prompts could. I went through the ringer, and I came out the other side feeling like an experienced player who had weathered an intense storm. I went into this mission expecting a fun time, but nothing that would sell me on Rise. I left a changed man. I left wanting more. While I may not be able to play Rise at launch, money's a bitch after all, I will at some point this year give Rise my attention. Against all odds, I overcame the Magnamalo, and Monster Hunter Rise sunk its teeth right into me. I'm 100% maining the hunting horn. Thank you everyone for watching. This video was quite the journey and quite the experience. Monster Hunter Rise releases on March the 26th, just a few days away, and if you haven't tried the demo out for yourself, now is the chance. I cannot recommend it enough. If you guys enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to check out my previous videos. I recently reviewed Super Mario 3D World for the Nintendo Switch, where I drew myself as a furry in the thumbnail, as well as a review of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, where I didn't hold back on my thoughts about Pokemon's first region. See you guys next time. Goodbye.